where he is, and so on. But friends, it is an honor. We are here in a hall of many cultures, of many languages, and of many peoples. But we are united with one common cause, one common struggle, one common fight. That eternal mission for justice, for equality, for a world run in the interests of working people. The baton of this struggle is passed from generation to generation. All the rights, all the gains that we have, not granted to us from above, from on high, not dependent on the goodwill and generosity of the powerful, not gifts somehow given to us as acts of charity by those who rule, but rights that were won by the struggle and sacrifice of people from below. Here we are. Here we are gathered in a nation, South Africa, that encapsulates those basic principles of struggle, of sacrifice, the defenders of every unjust status quo. They want us to believe that injustice is like the weather, that it's just the way the world is, that there's nothing we can do about it, that we have to grit our teeth, that we have to take the blows. When the tyranny of apartheid ruled over this nation, it seemed often to be invincible, unwavering, impossible to defeat. But the people of South Africa would not let this intolerable injustice reign over them. And in doing so, they did not just liberate themselves. They didn't just emancipate themselves. They bellowed a message so loud, so powerful, that it will remain deafening throughout the ages. That it is possible. That it is possible to fight injustice, and it is possible to win. Friends, today in this world, there are so many manifest injustices, acts of cruelty, of oppression. But those who fight for justice, they can look at the example of this nation of South Africa, and they can cry, "Did apartheid not fall?" And if apartheid can fall, then all other oppression can fall as well. As the great Nelson Mandela said himself, it always seems impossible until it is done. Friends, of course, as a movement, we should not be blinded about the challenges we face as a movement, as a cause, as a struggle. We live in a world where the richest 85 billionaires own as much wealth as the poorest half of humanity as a whole. A world in which over 3 million children die of poor nutrition every year. A world in which nearly half the world's population live on less than $2.50 a day. This is a world of extraordinary wealth, and yet so concentrated in so few hands, while so many languish in hardship and misery. This is a world where we have more than enough food to feed everybody, and yet people starve to death. This is a world where working people, the real wealth creators, create the wealth with their own hands and their brains, and yet all too often languish in poverty. But we here in this hall, we have a different vision. It is a vision that unites us. whether we are in the copper mines of Argentina, or in the postal services of Japan, in the telecommunications of Ivory Coast, or the media industry of Belgium. From Quito in Ecuador to Bamako in Mali, from Paris in France to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, our great cause is one and the same: to build a world run in the interests of those who keep society ticking day after day after day, working people. A world where nobody wants for food, for decent shelter, for good public services. A world where the wealth we all create together is shared fairly, equally, and justly. But friends, big business, capital, they've never been more global, never less respectful of national borders. We too must have the same approach. Because friends, we will never win our battles in our individual countries alone. It suits our enemies for us to be divided, to see each other as competitors, rivals, even enemies. And that is why the cry of our movement must ring loud and clear: an injury to one is an injury to us all. Friends, of course, there are language barriers, differences in cultures which should be celebrated. But as technology and transport and social media are more advanced than ever, what were once reasons for us to be divided have now become ever poorer excuses. We must overcome our divisions and become ever more coordinated, ever more united to build a different world. Everywhere across this world of ours, there is struggle. Like the platinum workers who went on strike in South Africa for 5 months this year. In London, where I come from, where the workers at the Ritzy Cinema in Brixton in South London have fought for that basic principle, a living wage for all who work. And I wear this t-shirt today in solidarity with those workers in London. The fight of trade unionists in Mali for a higher minimum wage and better rights. The South Korean motor workers fighting this year for improved pay and conditions. It makes no sense to see these struggles in isolation. They are all part of one common fight. Yes, the injustices and problems we all face, they differ in scale, in details, in specifics. But look at what we have in common. Young people all too deprived of secure work, often damaging their prospects for the rest of their lives. People robbed of that basic right, that basic need, a good quality, affordable home for them and their children. The privatization of public assets, the shifting of wealth and power to a booming and all too unaccountable elite. Friends, these attacks on basic workers' rights that were fought for at such cost by our ancestors, ever greater inequality and disparities of both wealth and power. I come from Britain. Britain is the 6th richest country on the face of the earth. But to be truthful, it is a country of great wealth for those at the top. Since 2008, Britain has been in the throes of one of the great financial economic crises in the history of that nation. And yet, in that time, the wealth of the top 1,000 people has doubled, while the wages of working people have fallen for the longest period since Queen Victoria reigned on the throne of England back in the 1860s, where well over 1 million workers in Britain have been driven into poverty wages in the last few years, where 1 million people in this prosperous, booming nation, Britain, 1 million people can no longer afford to feed themselves, driven to charities in order to receive food parcels, where the Red Cross is delivering food packages to families in Britain for the first time since the fall of Hitler in 1945. Where in London, a booming capital of one of the richest nations that has ever existed, oligarchs buy up newly built property and leave it empty, while 1 in 4 young people grow up in overcrowded homes. Where our proudest institution, our publicly run National Health Service, is being privatized and dismantled by a government that has no mandate to do so. And what has happened is this: a crisis of the market, a crisis of the private sector has been cleverly turned into a crisis of public spending. It has become an excuse for neoliberal ideologues to implement policies they always wanted to do but didn't think they could otherwise get away with. Friends, Britain is a country of immense wealth. Not one single child should be living in poverty, but millions are. Not a single family should be without an affordable home, but millions are. Not a single worker should be deprived of a secure job that gives them a wage they can live on, and yet millions are. It is a bankrupt social order, a society run as a racket for a tiny elite of people at the top. It is not just unjust. It is not just irrational. It is unsustainable, and it must go. But friends, look across Europe as well. Look at what the catastrophe of austerity has achieved in Europe. 5 million young people without work across the European Union. Over 24 million women and men without work. In Spain and Greece, over half of all young people without a job. Exploding poverty, falling wages, all while public services are sold off, taxes are cut on the rich, the rights of workers attacked. These are not just injustices, they are crimes. Friends, a British politician who inspired me, called Tony Benn, who died earlier this year, who I miss very much, he would always say this: the way you get social change is the burning flame of anger at injustice and the burning flame of hope at a better world. There is so much anger out there, but all too often, so little hope. Across Europe, ruling elites try to get people to blame the situation they are in, that their countries are in, not on those with power, but on their neighbors instead. Low-paid workers whose wages are being cut by their bosses, whose social security is being slashed by their governments. They are told, do not be angry with your boss, be angry at your unemployed neighbor instead. Private sector workers whose pensions are being attacked by their boss are told not to be angry with them, but to be angry that public sector workers like nurses and teachers still have a pension. That families who cannot get affordable homes because governments won't build them, or workers who can't get jobs because they've been stripped from the economy, they are told, do not be angry with the powerful. Envy instead the immigrants getting the jobs or homes that should be yours. And do you know what this is? It's the age-old policy of divide and rule. People are told, people are endlessly told, you are being robbed, so your less deserving neighbor should be robbed even more than you, rather than asking why anybody is being robbed in the first place. But we must ask the people of Europe this: who plunged your countries into economic disaster? Was it Nigerian nurses? Was it Polish fruit pickers? Was it Bangladeshi cleaners? Or was it a greedy, self-serving financial elite that is still getting away with it today? That is what we ask. But friends, this is why we have a greater responsibility to give people hope. Because without hope, people give up. They become resigned. Or they turn their anger on their neighbors instead. But there is hope. Look, for example, at so much of Latin America today, where progressive governments have rejected the dogma of neoliberalism and lifted 56 million people out of poverty this century alone. Poverty nearly halved across that continent, where in Uruguay, poverty slashed from nearly 40% to just over 10%. Wage councils created in every sector of the economy. Trade union membership surging, and where the minimum wage has been increased by 135%. What does Latin America tell us? It tells us this, that it is possible to defy neoliberalism and build a different sort of society instead. Latin America is a beacon for so many of us across the world today. And so, friends, let us unite. Let us stand together with these basic principles. That everybody who works, everybody who toils and struggles must be paid a wage that they can live on, for them and their families, a living wage, not a poverty wage. That everybody must have an affordable home with security. That everybody must have a secure job with dignity and rights. That utilities and public services, they shouldn't be run by private profiteers who put money before people. They should be run by the people, for the people. That however rich somebody is, however big a multinational company, they must pay every penny, every dollar of tax they are supposed to pay. We must end the scourge of tax avoidance which deprives the global south of $2 trillion. Money that belongs to the people, not money left in tax havens. Friends, that women must have the same rights, the same equal wages, the same dignity as men. That all families must have affordable childcare so they can work and support their children. That we must save our planet from environmental destruction, creating millions of quality jobs in the renewable energy industries of the future as we do. And of course, that trade unions must have proper rights and powers to ensure working people get a just slice of the wealth they create and have real power in their workplaces. And of course, that the scourges of racism, sexism, and homophobia must be forever crushed and obliterated. Working people must never be divided. And here's the thing, friends. These are not extreme or fringe ideas. They're basic common sense. That society should not be run in the interests of a tiny elite at the top, but societies must be run in the interests of working people. But I'll be honest, in the months, the years ahead, sometimes it will look too hard. It will seem too difficult. We face powerful people who do not want to give up their power, who do not want to give up their wealth. But we must, as we fight, think of our ancestors and of so many courageous people alive today, including in this hall. those who fought for freedom from colonial oppression, those who fought for the rights of women to vote, those who fought for democracy, those who fought for social security, those who fought against racist oppression. Friends, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Everything we have, all the rights and all the gains, not handed to us from above, but won through the struggle and sacrifice of people from below. And we owe it to our ancestors. We owe it to all those who fight today at such cost and sacrifice to themselves to keep fighting for a better world and to keep fighting until we win. Whether we are Argentinian or Malian, French or Malaysian, Nigerian or Japanese, we are one people. We have one struggle. And together, friends, together, we will build a world of justice, equality, and dignity. We stand together. We fight together. Friends, we will win this battle together. Thank you.